Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more kind soul stories. Voiceover. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Spread kindness, share love. The food truck's sizzling grill crackled as the aroma of freshly cooked shawarmas and fries drifted into the cool evening air. A small crowd had gathered in front, chatting while they waited for their turn. Among them was a girl in a faded apron, her hair tied back in a messy bun, forehead glistening with sweat. She wiped her hands on a rag and leaned out of the truck's open window, calling out the next order with a tired but polite smile. To her it was just another long day, another string of impatient customers who hardly bothered to look at her face, only at the food they craved. She didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. This tiny food truck was all she had, and keeping it running meant every order mattered. Somewhere in the middle of the line stood a tall man in a crisp suit, his presence somehow out of place among the college students and office workers. He waited quietly, his sharp gaze fixed on her, though she didn't notice. For her, he was just another customer. She didn't lift her eyes long enough to see the tailored cut of his jacket or the polished watch on his wrist. When he finally stepped up to the counter, she barely spared him a glance. "What'll it be?" she asked, her tone clipped, fingers already reaching for the notepad she barely needed. He smiled faintly, but instead of answering right away, he leaned in just slightly. "Still remember me?" he whispered. Her hand froze mid-motion, the pen slipping between her fingers. The voice was familiar, achingly familiar, and for the first time that evening, she looked up. "Do you want me to keep this style emotional and cinematic, or make it more casual, like a Wattpad rom-com scene?" Her eyes widened, heart thudding in her chest as recognition flickered through her like a jolt of electricity. She blinked, trying to reconcile. The man in the expensive suit with the memory that had been buried under years of struggle and survival. I don't, she began, but the words caught in her throat. He was smiling now, a slow, easy smile that didn't belong to the cold, untouchable man she remembered from her past. "You really don't remember me?" he asked, his tone teasing but not unkind. His gaze held a trace of nostalgia, as if he were holding onto a fragment of a shared moment long ago. She shook her head, both embarrassed and frustrated. I'm sorry," she stammered. "It's just, I get a lot of customers. Names, faces." Her voice trailed off. He laughed softly, the sound low and warm. "It's okay. I didn't expect you to, but I never forgot you." For a moment, the sizzling of the grill, the chatter of the crowd, and the honking cars faded into a blur. All she could hear was the soft confidence in his voice and the way the sunlight, or maybe the glow from the food truck's lights, caught the sharp angles of his face. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. Instead, she swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the distance the years had placed between them and the strange pull of something that felt like a second chance. He leaned back slightly, glancing at the menu, then back at her. "Still want the usual?" he asked, a playful spark in his eyes. She hesitated, then nodded slowly, feeling a flush creep up her neck. "Yeah, the usual," she murmured, almost whispering it back to him. He smiled again, this time knowingly, as if he had been waiting for her to say exactly that. And for the first time all day, she felt something shift, like the world had paused just long enough for them to catch up on lost time. She moved behind the counter with a mix of nervous energy and familiarity, flipping the order pad open and scribbling down his usual without meeting his eyes. The smell of frying onions and spiced meat filled the air, but it no longer dominated her senses. Her focus was entirely on him. He watched quietly, leaning against the truck's edge, his posture relaxed but his gaze unrelenting. There was a quiet intensity in the way he looked at her, one that made her stomach twist in a way she hadn't felt in years. Memories she had shoved aside, late-night study sessions, shared laughter over spilled coffee, stolen glances in crowded rooms, came rushing back unbidden. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said softly, breaking the hum of the truck. His voice had that same comforting familiarity she hadn't realized she missed. Yeah," she murmured, avoiding his eyes as she carefully assembled his order. "Life's complicated." Her hands shook slightly, whether from nerves or the heat of the grill, she wasn't sure. He stepped closer, tilting his head as if weighing her words. "I guess life's complicated for both of us," he said, a subtle smile tugging at his lips. "But it's funny, isn't it? No matter how much changes, some things stay the same." Her chest tightened. She didn't know whether to laugh, scold him, or just melt under the weight of those words. "Yeah, some things," she whispered, finally daring a glance up at him. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the years had never existed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp bill, setting it on the counter with a casual flick. "Keep it," he said, his eyes locked on hers. For old time's sake. Her fingers hovered over the money, unsure whether to take it. She wanted to argue, to tell him she couldn't accept charity, but something in his gaze made her pause. It wasn't pity, it was recognition, acknowledgement of the girl she had been and the woman she had become. She finally nodded, a small, almost shy smile breaking through her carefully maintained composure. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above the sizzling of the grill. He smiled back, the kind of smile that held promises and unspoken memories, and for a moment the chaotic street around them faded, leaving just the two of them, and a fragile thread reconnecting across time. The sound of the city, honking cars, distant laughter, and the low hum of streetlights seemed to fade into the background as she handed him his order. Their fingers brushed for the briefest moment, and a spark of recognition shot through her that made her stomach flutter unexpectedly. He took the food bag, but didn't turn away. Instead, he leaned casually against the truck, studying her with a quiet intensity that made her uneasy and intrigued at the same time. "You've changed," he said, his voice low and thoughtful, but in a good way. She blinked, unsure how to respond. "I guess life changes everyone," she said cautiously, forcing a casual tone, though her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. He smiled, a little crooked, and nodded. "Yeah, but some things you can't really change," he murmured, tilting his head as if remembering something important. "Like how stubborn you were back then." She rolled her eyes, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "I was young," she said, "and maybe a little foolish." He chuckled, the sound deep and genuine, and it made her feel like no time had passed at all between them. "Still foolish," he teased gently, "but in a better way." The wind picked up slightly, tossing stray strands of her hair across her face. She brushed them back, avoiding his eyes, yet secretly grateful for his presence. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled at memories she thought she had buried long ago. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked suddenly, voice quieter now, almost hesitant. She hesitated, gripping the edge of the counter. Memories she had long tried to forget rose unbidden. Late-night arguments, shared dreams, moments of laughter and frustration, but also the feelings she had never fully let go of. "Sometimes," she admitted softly, her voice barely above the hum of the street. He nodded, a shadow of wistfulness crossing his face. "Me too," he said, "and I've wondered if we had another chance." Her heart skipped, caught between excitement and fear. She didn't know if this was real or just a trick of nostalgia, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt. The world around them seemed to shrink, leaving only the food truck, the scent of fried onions, and the weight of everything left unsaid between them. He reached out, not to touch, but just enough to close the space between them with a subtle gesture. "So, coffee sometime?" he asked, a tentative hope in his eyes. She hesitated, the moment stretching like fragile glass. Then slowly, a small smile broke across her face. "Yeah, coffee sounds good," she said, surprising even herself with the warmth in her tone. And for the first time that evening, the city noises returned, but they no longer felt intrusive. Instead, they felt like a backdrop to something new beginning, something neither of them had expected, but both had secretly hoped for. The next morning, the small cafe she'd agreed to meet him at was quiet, the soft aroma of coffee beans and baked bread filling the air. She arrived early, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear and trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. She kept telling herself it was just coffee, just a friendly catch-up, but the memory of his gaze from the food truck lingered like a warmth she couldn't shake. When he arrived, he slid into the seat across from her with a casual ease that contrasted sharply with the tension she felt. He wore the same tailored suit from yesterday, but there was a softness in his smile that made him feel less like a millionaire CEO and more like the boy she remembered. "Good morning," he said, his eyes lighting up when they met hers. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting." She shook her head quickly. "No, not at all," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm glad we did this." He nodded, and for a moment they just looked at each other, both aware of the fragile space they were stepping into. Then he picked up his coffee, swirling it absent-mindedly, and leaned back. "I have to admit," he said slowly, "I wasn't sure you'd even agree to meet me again after yesterday." She felt a twinge of defensiveness mixed with curiosity. "Why not?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. "Because, well," he hesitated, his fingers tapping lightly against the mug, "you looked like you didn't remember me at all. And honestly, I wasn't sure how you'd feel seeing me now." She studied him, noticing the vulnerability beneath the confident exterior. I didn't expect to see you either," she admitted, "and I was caught off guard. I've been so focused on the food truck, on surviving, that I didn't even think about the past. But yesterday, it reminded me that some memories don't just disappear." He smiled, leaning forward slightly, a spark of mischief returning to his eyes. "So some memories linger, huh?" "Yes," she said, a small laugh escaping her. "Some memories linger too long, apparently." He chuckled softly, and the sound made her heart skip again. "Good," he said simply, "because I've been carrying one for a long time, and yesterday I realized maybe it's time to stop carrying it alone." Her chest tightened at his words. She didn't know where this conversation would lead, but she felt the first real thread of connection stretching between them since that long-ago past. The cafe was warm, the morning sunlight spilling across their table, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe some chances, long lost, long forgotten, could finally find their way back. The morning stretched lazily, sunlight streaming through the cafe's large windows, casting golden patterns across the table. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, still caught in the swirl of emotions that had begun with his whispered words at the food truck. Across from her, he watched her with a quiet intensity, the kind that made it impossible to look away. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I've imagined this moment 100 times. Seeing you again, talking to you, I didn't know if it would be awkward or easy. Turns out it's both." She laughed softly, the sound warm and unguarded. "Easy in what way? Because I feel like I'm stumbling over my own words." He reached across the table just enough to brush his fingers against hers. "Because some things don't change," he said, his voice low and sincere. "The way you make me feel, like I'm finally home, even if only for a moment." Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt a blush rising to her cheeks. She looked down, trying to steady herself, but his words lingered in the air, leaving her breathless. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Then don't say anything," he said with a small, understanding smile. "Just be here, with me, right now." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to let go of the walls she had built around her heart. She reached out, letting her hand cover his, feeling the warmth, the steady pulse, and the unspoken promise that had begun to form between them. They talked for hours, about the past, about dreams they'd chased and lost, and about the small victories that had kept them going. Laughter came easily, and even the silences felt comfortable, filled with a shared understanding that words could never fully capture. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, spilling golden light across their faces, he finally said, "I don't want this to be a fleeting moment. I want more, if you'll let me." She looked at him, seeing the honesty in his eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed to anyone. Her heart swelled with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. I want more too," she admitted softly, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. "I just wasn't sure you'd want the same." He smiled, his hand tightening over hers. "I've always wanted the same. I just needed the right moment to tell you." The city outside continued its noisy rhythm, but inside that small cafe, time seemed to pause. For the first time in years, two hearts that had drifted apart found their way back to each other. And as they sat there, hands entwined, laughter and conversation weaving around them, they both understood something simple yet profound. Some connections are too strong to be broken, some memories too powerful to be forgotten, and some chances, even after years of waiting, are worth taking. By the time they left the cafe together, the world felt a little brighter, the air a little lighter, and their hearts a little fuller. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together, starting with a second chance that neither of them would ever let slip away again. The end.